We have this story from the Post-Millennial. Fourth indictment against Trump expected in Georgia next week. Willis has stated that she plans to announce potential charges by September 1st at the latest. I don't know what to tell you, man. Everything we see happening, what do you think is going to happen in 2024? You think it's going to be some peaceful, everyone comes and shakes hands and smiles? With the degree of psychotic behavior, I mean, they just gunned a guy down and killed him in his house.
Yeah.
Whether I'm not making a comment on anything other than that a guy died.
With the level of intensity that now I feel like it's a kind of calm before the storm kind of thing, because it has been really chill, like news wise, when it comes to the actual election and stuff. There hasn't been any kind of big developments to talk about. I mean, we keep talking about, DeSantis kind of just petering out. That's been the big story for days and days and days. Or, maybe Vivek is getting some traction and stuff, but it's mostly very chill, not big announcements or anything like that. So I feel like, it is the calm before the storm, and I feel like it's going to be really, really weird with AI and the way that's going to affect
the deepfakes aren't
yeah
even coming. They've only just begun.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, now is the calm before the storm. But I think that once the election starts, or once the campaigning starts going in earnest, it's going to be really weird. With people aren't going to know what to believe. And it's going to be really weird. I don't know that anyone's ever going to feel confident about who won an election ever again, just because they're going to feel like I don't know that people are going to feel like they confidently can say that they made an informed decision that was actually informed by the truth, as opposed to, really propagandized.
So I think it's going to be a mess whether Biden or Trump becomes the next president. And I don't think we're on the verge of some civil war. I think people are too lazy for it still, honestly. You might have a few people who are real amped up. But I mean, the FBI has been murdering people for a long time. That's, I understand that this is politically charged, but every murder the FBI has ever committed in the past has been politically charged. So I don't think this is necessarily a new thing. And, if you're not online all the time, you talk to people, they're a little worried about stuff, but not nearly at the levels that everyone is on Twitter and social media. So I don't think that we're at the verge of any sort of conflict.
One of the things that I think when people say that is, I think of the idea that there's only a certain small percentage of people that are involved in any kind of political, whether it be activists, or whether it be just going out and demonstrating or protesting, or whether it be people that actually do get violent and stuff. It's always a small minority of people that get into that stuff. Like Tim's talked multiple times about how when he was in Egypt, there was the Arab Spring was literally kicking off in Egypt, but at the same time there were people that were at cafes just going about their normal day. And I feel like the people that are on Twitter and stuff are most likely the people that would be the ones that would be at least the most likely to be politically informed. So it seems to me to make sense that those people would be the most likely to be politically active, up to including violence.
I think you nailed it. It's never the majority. It is never I don't think there's for the most part a conflict in history where the overwhelming majority of a population was actively participating in a conflict. Even in World War II, we're looking at what is a million some odd conscriptions in a country of at the time. What was it? How many people were around then? It's a fraction. Yeah, it's a fraction. I bet it then maybe 60 to 100 million or something like that. Probably less. What is it?
In 1941, 132 million.
132 million. And how many soldiers did we conscript? A million?
I don't know.
It's somewhere around there, yeah.
So that's 0.7, 0.0
Yeah, it's a
something.
small percentage
that were actively engaged in the conflict. And the reality is the people who were conscripted weren't actual participants in the conflict in the political sense. Mm-hmm. It was I got to tell you, I bet most people didn't care. And if you went around, I bet there were people going yeah, but if you ask your neighbor, they don't care about Germany or what's going on. Yet somehow we found ourselves in that conflict. So what I see happening, you get this guy who's posting on social media saying this horrifying stuff. You get Antifa, you get violent extremists who go out, and the majority of people will cower, but conflict happens. Eventually what happens is the question of who's in charge. There's a moment Matt Taibbi wrote about where two cars speed towards the police station. Two men in suits jump out, run full speed up to the door, run inside and run to the police chief and say, arrest that man, and point to each other. And now the police chief says, which one do I arrest? Who's in charge? What happens then? There's a bunch of different ways things like this go. You have revolution. You have military takeover. In Egypt, the military took over. The military just decided, you know what? The civil unrest is too much, and they removed the president twice in the span of, I think, like a year. But most people aren't paying attention to that. I look outside, and the guy sitting in McDonald's watching soccer. He doesn't care. I went to the mall in Heliopolis while the revolution is taking place in Egypt, and people were just shopping for cell phones. And if you asked any one of them, not a single person cared. And then a day later, the military removed the president who was duly elected. Why? He was a Muslim. And the secular people in the country, there were more secular people than Muslim Brotherhood supporters, but the Muslim Brotherhood was the largest faction of voters, so they won. It was a legitimate first past the post election. Military said, we don't care. But the average person out shopping. I go to a cafe, I'm having coffee, nobody's talking about it. Now, you actually go out and you'll hear people talk about it. So it's worrying to me in that I don't expect the average person to care. I'm concerned about the people who are politically active and motivated. And I'm concerned with, look, if the reality is you're right, nobody cares and no one's going to do anything, then we're dealing with a federal government that has just amplified their corruption 100-fold to the point where they're like Watergate was a scandal. Mm-hmm. This, apparently Joe Biden's still the good guy. That is a degree of corruption and malfeasance we have never seen in this country before. And what? Nothing's happening? It breaks down. If nothing happens, if we don't have a new, like the best case scenario for everybody, Trump or Vivek or even Ron DeSantis, any one of these guys who pledges to fire people, the best case scenario is they do get elected, they do fire people, they do start weeding out corruption, and we turn this ship upright and we start saving it. Otherwise, the two scenarios are overt conflict between angry political factions or revolution.
Yeah, what bothers me...
Psychotic despots go around and mercilessly beat, arrest, and lock up innocent people.
What gets me about these faction conflicts is that I think if there's an enemy of the United States, they would want that to happen. It's very easy to destroy or take over or surpass an enemy if they're infighting, if they're in the middle of half the country's fighting itself. So they want people to walk outside and be like, hold on there, I think you're the enemy. And the other person's like, no, hold on there, you're the enemy. I saw it on TV. And they're like, no, I saw it on TV. That's what they want. So if people are brainwashed or afraid or dumbed, then they might do that. But so not only do we need to weed out corruption within the government itself, we need to control the media in a way, or at least influence the media so that people are not afraid of each other. I
think that's naive. I think when you have people like these leftists who've come on this show or the culture war who directly advocate for giving children sexually explicit content, I don't know what you're arguing for. You tell those people, I'm sorry, I am not going to allow you to present this book of adult pictures to children, you should be in prison. And they argue, I've got 80 million people at my back that tell you to STFU. Now you've got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, throwing people in prison for advocating for a book is different.
I didn't say anything about throwing them in prison.
You just said you should be in prison. You just said that.
For giving the pictures to children.
You said the people that came on this show.
No. I'm saying the people who are giving these books to kids should be in prison. So, the 80 million people at their back voting in support of it. And you ask them and they'll deny it. They'll say, well, I don't know about that. But they're certainly complicit in it.
Were you saying, Reed?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the federal government's a lost cause and trying to kumbaya everybody into peace again is not going to happen. So I think that separation and people going to places where people think the same way they are is the ultimate solution. I mean, at this point, you know, when I see conservatives crying about the streets of San Francisco and like how horrible it's become, I'm just like, I don't take them seriously anymore. It's like, why do you care about San Francisco anymore? It's so obviously toast and gone, or Chicago.
Because they vote in our federal elections, which have an impact on whether we're going to war, whether we're not protecting our borders, whether or not the government is increasing the tax rate. So when you have California bringing in non-citizens and using that to inflate their census numbers so they get more votes in Congress and in the Electoral College, we've got a very, very serious problem with what San Francisco is doing.
Yeah, well, that's the problem right there, that they have control over us, and the solution is trying to decrease the control that these other states have over us. The federal government needs to decentralize. Instead of trying to fix it and just get better people into these positions, we need to go back to a more decentralized approach, like the 10th Amendment actually provided for. Yeah. That's the only solution.
But I don't completely agree with that. I maybe would have agreed with it a while ago, but now we see the issue of these West Coast states passing laws where people can kidnap children and then sterilize them, and the state will protect the kidnapper. So there's a problem then when we say, everybody just pick your state and then shut up. Okay, what happens when you're in Oklahoma? And is it Oklahoma? Let me make sure I have my states right. What happens if you're in, it might be Kansas. I got to make sure. I think it's Oklahoma. What happens when, hold on.
Yeah, adjacent to Colorado.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make. What happens when you're in Oklahoma? I think it's actually either of them. And a woman, you're with a woman, she gets pregnant, and then she decides 6 months on, she doesn't want to be with you. So she flees to Colorado. Colorado, no limit on abortion. Oklahoma, ban on abortion. So what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people are uncomfortable with that thought, but at this point, that's the only thing that I think is going to save pockets of society.
So I'm asking you, what happens next?
She goes to Colorado and gets abortions.
And that man says, well, I guess she's going to kill my son, and then just sits there and twiddles his thumbs?
Well, that's the way it is now. I mean, to be fair. So
Right now, there is it's that way now. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It wasn't that way before. It used to be that there was a certain, yes, these things could happen. Yes, there are bad stories, but the more people geographically polarize from each other, the more the more the culture divides and escalates. Maybe abortion isn't the issue, but you run into that wall of there's going to be a kid kidnapped. There's going to be a guy who lives in a neighborhood, and he's going to have a creepy smile, and he's going to go on TikTok and say, "Kids, don't listen to your parents. Your parents are bad. You should do whatever you want. I support you." He's going to get a message from a kid who says, "Actually, I live a few blocks away, and I want to get sterilization surgery." And the guy's going to say, "I will drive you personally to California to make this happen." He's going to kidnap the kid, go to California. Do you think the parents are going to be like, "Well, guess my kid's sterilized"? Or do you think there's going to be a conflict between the major growing cultures between states?
Yeah, I get your point. Is it the case where a third party not related to a child could take a child to it? Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. I think that's that might be specifically in Washington, however.
That's a rough one. I didn't know
Washington State.
Yeah. I think Washington State was the one that explicitly said anybody who helps a child receive gender-affirming care will not face prosecution in their state.
So when we live in a post-rational society, which we do, there's no universal reason anymore, and we live in a quasi-democracy where the people of the country get to decide what is right and wrong, basically. I mean, where is the win in the end there?
Getting rich.
I mean, there's no moral win in the end because you're dealing with people who don't believe in the same thing you do. So that's why I'm saying at this point in the game, you should move places where people do agree with you because it's the only hope. You're never going to convert the country.
Sure. I don't completely disagree. My point is just that you have to ask yourself what happens after everyone geographically polarizes.
Well, I think the liberal cities are going to continue to fall apart. I mean, I don't
think
it's sustainable.
And then what happens when people in cities don't have food or water?
They're going to leave or they're going to die. I mean, it's going to get bad, but
they're not just going to leave. So if you look at like New York City, liberal city, most of the state's relatively red. Mm-hmm. So what is the city going to do when the city is struggling and doesn't have food or water? The same thing the left always does. Steal it from somebody else. The easiest thing to do is to go up north and go to the rural farms and just seize their food. Hey, it's what communists do. They're going to say the people need this more than you. They already do it in California with the water. They tell the farmers, who are the lifeblood of the whole state and a good portion of this country, that they don't have surface water rights because the surface water has to go to the liberal cities where people have voting power. Then the poor people who live in these farming districts lose access to well water when the farmers drill into the earth to get groundwater to grow crops. Mm-hmm. You can already see how that starts to break down. My experience in California during the drought made me understand the importance of the Electoral College, why it is absolutely necessary, and the Senate and Congress, how the founding fathers did this. It's brilliant. In California, you have poor migrant workers and their wells, for water run 30 feet deep. There's canal water running through in Tulare County, and I asked the farmers, why don't you use that water there? And they said, we're not allowed to. It's illegal. Because the cities voted to take the water, and the politicians say, well, the people need water first. So what the farms do then is they drill tens of thousands of feet into the earth for groundwater, which drains the groundwater, and now all the poor people have no water anymore. Their 30-foot wells can't reach water, and the water stops. The Electoral College changes the way the voting system would work. Now, you can't just go to this small, or I should say a Republican system, and I mean that in the philosophical sense, not in the colloquial sense. You have to go to them and say, we need you all to vote. We can't just vote to take from you. So that's the point. When you look at why we break things down by states, why they have senators, so that you can't just say, we outvote you, therefore we get your water.
Right. And my statement is it's not broken down enough. Have you heard of the Free State of Jefferson initiative?
Yes.
And California trying to break into 3 different states?
Right. Greater Idaho.
Yeah, exactly.
Jefferson.
Those are the type of things that need to happen because you're right. San Francisco and LA control an entire state now. And that's the problem is all that centralized control. So if that can be removed and dispersed, I think that's the only peaceful solution.
It's not a peaceful solution. I don't disagree. I think it is a better move to make now. But when you have 10 million people in the New York metro and it's falling apart and collapsing, a decent amount of them leave, and a decent amount of them will band together and say, we deserve it. And then you get conflict. You're going to have people in cities like the Colorado River is a really interesting problem. The Great Lakes are a really interesting problem. You've got states, I think it was Arizona, trying to sue to claim the rights over Great Lakes water, arguing the Great Lakes are part of the United States and the water should be dispersed. And then you have the Great Lakes Coalition. Fortunately, because I believe Ontario is a part of it, it's now international and other states can't just drain the Great Lakes. But the Great Lakes need to be replenished. They go down if there's too much consumption. What I see happening with places like San Francisco and why I'm concerned about them is that as they fall into chaos, those people who live there, they need food and they need water. They need shelter and they want security. And if that falls apart, even by their own fault, they will come and take it from you. And that means maybe they just move to where you live and then start voting for things that destroy your systems. Or maybe they stay there, it continues to decay, and then eventually they just start going and stealing from farms, passing laws where they lock farms down and claim property, and you get communism.
I mean, how is that not happening under our federalist system we have now, though? The same thing's happening. They're doing that to every single state.
If we had property rights, if we had a federal system that actually enforced equality under the law, you have a lot less of this. Now someone shows up and says, I get your farm. They say, I sue you. Now it goes to the federal government. They supersede the state and say, you can't do that. You can't take someone's farm. But that's breaking down. And that's the issue. We don't have a shared, it's a combination of things. It's not just government. It's culture. We don't have a shared moral framework anymore. You have the rise of leftists. And the funny thing is, the success of this nation gave rise to weak-minded, entitled individuals who seek to steal from others without doing any of the work. And that leads to collapse. I mean, these people vote. So they vote to take, and they keep doing it. And then what ends up happening is one of two things. As the system starts to break down, you either get revolution or, well, there's a few ways. Reform is really possible, but it's really hard. You're either going to get revolution or civil war if it really does escalate to that point. And I kind of feel like when we learned the DOJ is going after Trump's lawyers, look, man, it was already unprecedented. The DOJ went after Joe Biden's political rival, Donald Trump. Unprecedented. Now they're saying they're going to go after Trump's lawyers, the people giving him legal counsel. The government basically saying, if you provide constitutionally protected services, legal representation to someone who we oppose, we're going to lock you up. There's an obvious next step to this. Advocacy. They're already saying they were political consultants. One of the co-conspirators was a consultant, not even a lawyer. Someone who advocated that Trump file these lawsuits and seek alternate electors. The next step is fairly obvious. Those who incite criminal actions. They've already made the claim that it's not free speech to incite criminal activity, right? So now when they say that Donald Trump's actions in 2020 were criminal, the next step beyond his lawyers is anyone who publicly spoke advocacy for Donald Trump's illegal actions was inciting people to commit crimes, and they're next.
So I think the South should have been allowed to secede during the Civil War, and the rewritten history about it is that it was all about slavery that had nothing to do with anything else. And that has built an American dream that it's wrong to let people leave this country and wrong to let people do their own thing, and that it's morally correct to bind us all together as one country. If the South had actually left, I don't think, the North was kind of doing what you're describing that leftists do, is always trying to reach out and get more power. They were taxing the South a lot more than they should have been. And so that type of thing is happening now. The Reconstruction mindset has really just like kept going and given us the progressive era and destroyed this country. And unless we finally just break off and say, you know what, we don't all belong under this same system. We need to have, different governments that, respect people the way they want to live. And, I just think it's the only way we can go forward.
And then what? What happens after that?
I think that the leftists are always going to want more control, like you said, but the only way to not give it to them is starve them of it, right?
What likely happens after a separation, if the United States were to break into two, and the left called it like Jesus land and the United States of Canada, that's the meme they put out, the next likely thing to happen is a unipolar Chinese communist planet, where trade is going to be regulated under their currency and their rules and their whims, and you're going to end up with not NATO control, but BRICS control. That could go on for several decades, maybe 100 years, who knows? What that means for Americans is, well, for one, it could mean less war. It could mean that we can live peacefully and farm in our own states and mind our own business, but it means your standard of living drops by some odd 90%. And that's, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the issue is the Petro Dollar. It props up our economy and makes Americans wealthy based off nothing. When this country splits in two, the Petro Dollar ceases to exist. BRICS nations basically take over the global economy and oil trade. And that means Americans have to once again start producing, and we don't. So for those that advocate for this, the end result is going to be you will work more than you've ever worked in your life, and your standard of living will be 90% lower. Me personally, I don't mind tending to chickens and animals and working on a farm and reading books and just working every day. These liberals and these leftists, they're going to cry. They're going to cry more than they've ever cried in their lives, and they're going to beg to bring back the petrodollar.
Don't you think that's kind of an inevitability at this point, though? Like that's
why I say what happens
unavoidable.
next.
Yeah, I mean,
well, I mean, look, in the event that I really do mean it. If you get a Donald Trump, a Vivek, or even a Ron DeSantis, if they win and they actually do follow through on the things they've said, it's not inevitable. There is a possibility that we come out on top of this successfully. And that's still sort of bad news for anti-war individuals because the U.S. machine just keeps on keeping on. But to fire corrupt prosecutors, to criminally charge corrupt politicians, and to reform and restore the actual, I don't want to say moral framework of the past in its entirety, but the core moral frameworks of classical liberalism the founding fathers believed in, then things start to repair and strengthen. But you've got to get rid of the rot. You got to carve out the rot first and then rebuild.
There's part of me that does think that if you can wake up the average shit lib, right? The average liberal that gets conned into illiberal things because some authoritarian convinces them that they'll be safer or they'll be looked at, as the nice guy, or it's racist to not do this, or whatever the con from the progressives is. If you can convince your average bad liberal that they're being a bad liberal and they need to come back to things like the rule of law, the freedom of speech, that things like the rule of law has a big effect on, the criminal element in your cities, and that has a big effect on the economy. And if you can remind liberals that these things actually do matter and that the way they've been voting and the behaviors of the politicians they're electing are actually illiberal, then I think that you could have a positive result without some kind of massive revolution. But without the people realizing that the things that they're asking the government to do are bad, illiberal, and producing the results that they actually don't like, as long as people don't realize that, as long as they think that voting for the what sounds nice is the proper course of action, there's not going to be any significant change.
I just wanted to also add that, not just on a warfare front, but on an economic front, ever since we've been on the petrodollar, the dollar has lost all its value. If you look, 1971, we came off the gold standard. And then I think in 1974, we went on the Petro Dollar. And ever since then, the dollar has just tanked. So I don't think it was a reliable system, even with, competent leadership. I don't think it was sustainable.
I want to show you this picture. This is the only path forward. Right here. Everyone take a look. That's it.
Who dat?
I'm just kidding. This is so I pulled up some AI images that I made because I think they're funny. But look at this guy's hat. Like this one guy over here is wearing a very, very tiny hat for some reason. This is Midjourney made this. It's Generalissimo Trump. But I want to show you another image. This is what the establishment fears. Donald Trump shaking hands with Sonic the Hedgehog. But this one is actually the one I want you to see. Because if you remove Sonic the Hedgehog from this image, it actually looks like a real photo of Donald Trump running down the street. The average person's not going to be able to understand that this was generated by AI. Granted, we put Sonic the Hedgehog in it, so we know this is not real. But this is what I'm talking about with the political battle that's coming up this next year. The deep fakes that we are going to see of audio, of video, no one's going to know it's real. There is not. I mean, look, if Joe Biden is willing to steal the private communications of Trump and try and lock him up, you think Democrats aren't going to make fake audio of him, fake videos of him?
Yeah.
You're going to do all that and more. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.